Nothing changes until you do. Read that again, because maybe your soul has been trying to whisper it for months. Maybe you've mistaken exhaustion for identity, routine for peace, survival for a personality. But deep down, you know that the version of you everyone sees isn't the whole story. You laugh at the right moments, get things done, even offer advice to others. Yet inside, something aches. Not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown the life you built to survive, and now every quiet moment feels heavier. Not from failure, but from the weight of pretending. You don't need another affirmation. You don't need more hustle, more noise, more pretending. You need truth. And truth begins when you stop decorating your cage and start asking, what would it feel like to finally become who I am beneath it all? This video isn't here to motivate you. It's here to awaken you, to remind you of what you've always known but kept buried. That change isn't something you chase. It's something you allow, and if you're ready to finally remember who you were before the world told you who to be, if you're done with shallow peace and tired of deep pretending, then stay, because we're about to enter the space where real transformation begins, and if at any point this message resonates with your soul, you'll find a gift in the pinned comment. A short but powerful ebook that goes even deeper. Also, don't forget to subscribe, because this is just the beginning. We all want change, but most of us don't want to face what it actually asks of us, not because we're weak, but because we were never taught how to outgrow ourselves. We were told to improve, not transform, to get better, not to become different. And so, year after year, we chase surface upgrades, new routines, new goals, new identities polished for applause, but underneath it all, we still feel the same, still stuck in patterns that quietly repeat, still haunted by versions of ourselves that we swore we had left behind. You wake up, go through the motions, say the right things, and yet something feels off. You're functioning, yes, but are you living? There's a kind of invisible loop many people fall into, one where growth becomes performance, healing becomes productivity, and self-worth is measured by how little space we take up. You don't need more noise. You need permission to stop. To stop holding together a life that no longer fits. To stop apologizing for wanting peace. To stop identifying with a version of you that was built in survival, not truth. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This isn't just a video. It's a mirror. Chance to pause and ask, what patterns are still running my life without my consent? Because transformation doesn't start with effort. It starts with awareness. And in the moments that follow, we'll explore why your life feels like it's repeating itself. Why you crave freedom but still choose the cage. Why change feels so close, yet slips away every time you try to reach it. You're not here by accident. This isn't just another piece of content to scroll past. It's a call, a quiet invitation, to finally step out of the cycle and return to yourself. So take a breath and keep listening, because what you're about to remember might change everything. Why life feels like it's repeating. The psychology of patterned existence. There's a strange moment we all encounter at some point. You look around and wonder how your life became a loop. Same mornings, same feelings, same choices wrapped in slightly different disguises. You're not in crisis, you're just on repeat. Carl Jung believed that what we fail to make conscious will continue to direct our lives without our awareness. And nowhere is this more evident than in the way we unknowingly recreate the same emotional realities over and over again. It's not just bad luck. It's not a curse. It's the result of something deeper, unresolved parts of the psyche trying to express themselves. Let's get real. Your life isn't repeating because you're lazy. It's repeating because you're loyal. Loyal to a version of you that was built for survival, not for expansion. That version of you learned how to avoid rejection, how to stay invisible to avoid conflict, how to seek love by pleasing, how to stay safe by not being too much. It worked. You made it through. But now those same patterns are becoming the prison walls you can't seem to break through. And yet the mind resists letting go because it sees those patterns as protection. You wake up and tell yourself, this time will be different. But by midday, your nervous system has already chosen the familiar path. You react the same way. You engage in the same emotional dance. Not because you want to, but because it's what your unconscious believes is safe. That's the trap of the inner autopilot. Jung described this as the shadow, the part of us we deny, suppress, or ignore. And ironically, it's this very shadow that ends up living our life for us when we don't bring it into awareness. You say you want love, but deep down, you fear being truly seen. So you choose partners who confirm the belief that love is conditional. You say you want peace, but silence terrifies you. So you unconsciously create chaos just to feel alive. You say you're tired of the same results, but you avoid the discomfort that transformation demands. And that's the irony. Your patterns aren't your enemy. They're your teacher. They're the mirror showing you exactly where you still live in reaction to the past. Here's the truth Jung would want you to know. You're not broken. You're just stuck in an identity that's expired. An identity built during a time when surviving was more important than thriving. You learned to cope. But now your soul is ready to evolve. And evolution isn't linear. It's not about doing more. It's about unbecoming, letting go of everything you are not. In Jungian psychology, this is the path of individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are beneath the conditioning, the personas, the wounds. But it starts with recognition. You have to see it, clearly, honestly, without judgment. Notice when you default to old behaviors, when your inner voice sounds like someone from your past, when you feel the urge to shrink, apologize, or overcompensate. Those are the breadcrumbs. Follow them. They lead straight to your unconscious. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you're here, you're willing, you're listening. That's everything, because the cycle only breaks when awareness enters, when you pause instead of react, when you ask, is this who I am, or who I learned to be? You'll find that the same circumstances keep returning, not to punish you, but to give you another chance to respond from your truth instead of your past. That's where the real change begins. Not with a grand gesture, not with a 30-day challenge, but in a single breath. A single conscious choice to stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of what's familiar. Your life isn't repeating. It's revealing. Revealing everything still waiting to be healed, integrated, and transformed. And once you bring those pieces into the light, you don't have to keep reliving them. You get to rewrite the story. You get to become, not just exist. The illusion of safety and the real cost of staying the same. Most people don't fear change. They fear losing who they had to become to survive. That's the hard truth. The version of you that stayed quiet to keep the peace. The one that always showed up strong because weakness was never an option. That version built your current life. So naturally, part of you hesitates to let it go. But here's the paradox. Staying the same is far more dangerous than changing ever was. Carl Jung believed that when we stay too long in patterns that no longer serve us, our psyche begins to revolt. Not with loud declarations, but with quiet symptoms. Restlessness, fatigue, a subtle dissatisfaction with everything you once thought you wanted, a haunting whisper inside that says, this can't be all there is. That's not weakness. That's your soul trying to wake you up. And yet most people hit snooze. Why? Because we confuse comfort with safety. We cling to what's familiar, even when it's painful, because it's predictable. And the human mind craves predictability more than it craves happiness. This is where Jung's insight becomes revolutionary. The psyche will create suffering not to punish you, but to push you. Anxiety, depression, emotional numbness. They're not always signs of dysfunction. Sometimes they're signs that your inner world is asking you to grow. You've outgrown the lies you once needed, and your soul knows it. But here's the catch. Growth isn't always graceful. Sometimes it looks like falling apart. Losing motivation, questioning everything, breaking down in private because your external life no longer matches your internal truth. That's not failure. That's the death of the mask. Jung spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted. And while it helps us function in the world, it also keeps us from full authenticity if we cling to it for too long. Eventually the persona cracks, and beneath it is a self you barely recognize, but deeply long to become. This moment, the space between who you've been and who you're becoming, is sacred. It's terrifying. It's where most people run back to the familiar. But not you. Because you're beginning to understand something most never will. Nothing changes if you stay the same. No new results, no deeper peace. No soul-level joy, only the same thoughts, same wounds, and same silent suffering. This is why transformation feels like loss. Because you're not just letting go of the past, you're letting go of an identity, and that identity, as limiting. As it was, held meaning. It helped you fit in, it kept you safe, it gave you control. So the grief is real, but so is the liberation. Jung said, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it." This isn't about rejecting who you were. It's about honoring that version, while making room for the self that's emerging. The self that doesn't betray its own boundaries. The self that no longer begs for crumbs of validation. The self that knows peace is found not in perfection, but in presence. This is the path of individuation, the sacred unfolding of the real you, but it requires courage. Not the kind that fights dragons, but the kind that sits in silence and faces the dragons within. It asks you to meet your fear with compassion, to stop performing for love and start receiving it by being real, to trade certainty for possibility. It means asking hard questions. Who am I beneath who I was taught to be? What do I truly desire? Not what I was told I should want. What parts of me have I silenced in exchange for acceptance? These aren't just philosophical reflections, they're doorways. Each answer you find becomes a key to unlocking the next level of your being, and no, it won't happen overnight. This work is slow, sacred, messy, but every honest answer, every uncomfortable truth, every step away from the old self, brings you closer to the life you were meant to live. And it's not a life of constant bliss, it's a life of alignment, where your outer world begins to reflect the peace you've cultivated within. That's the real transformation. Not a sudden change, but a gradual return to your voice, to your power, to your truth. So if you feel like you're breaking, know this. You're not breaking, you're shedding. And the pieces that fall away were never the real you. They were just the armor. Now it's time to meet who's been underneath all along. Becoming who you were always meant to be, the real you, was never missing. She was just buried, under expectations, survival patterns, and inherited beliefs. Carl Jung called this process individuation. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about peeling away everything you're not. The pain you've felt, the disconnection, the deep ache in your chest that couldn't be explained. It wasn't random. It was your soul whispering, God, that there's more. More than playing small. More than fitting into spaces that never felt like home. More than pretending you're fine when you're actually fading. And here's what Jung understood so clearly. Until you become conscious of the unconscious, it will rule your life, and you'll call it fate. That means the beliefs you absorbed from childhood, the roles you played in relationships, the walls you built around your heart. They don't define you, they were adaptations, clever strategies to stay loved, to stay safe, but now they're outdated. You're not here to survive anymore. You're here to live, and living means feeling. All of it. The grief of who you couldn't be, the rage of who was never seen, the hope that just maybe you can rewrite the story. You're not broken. You're becoming someone who no longer asks for permission to exist, someone who stops abandoning herself just to be chosen, someone who turns down the noise of the world to hear her own voice again. This isn't self-help, this is self-return, and yes, it will cost you everything that wasn't real. You'll lose people who only knew your mask. You'll outgrow spaces that celebrated your silence. You'll shed identities that kept you small, but what you gain is everything. Because there comes a day when you no longer recognize your old life, not because it was terrible, but because it no longer fits. That's how you know the transformation is real. And here's something no one talks about. Healing doesn't always make your life prettier. At first, it can make it messier. Because when you stop performing and you start noticing who was clapping for the act and who sees your truth, you might feel lonelier. But that loneliness? It's sacred. It's the space where the old connections fall away and the real ones begin. People who don't need you to shrink. People who don't flinch at your shadows. People who don't just want your light, they honor your whole being. Jung once wrote, The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what he didn't say is that it takes radical courage to stop performing, to disappoint others so you can stop disappointing yourself, to stand in your truth even when it shakes everything. You don't owe the world a version of you that's easy to digest. You owe yourself a life that feels like freedom. So start asking deeper questions. What day did I abandon to be accepted? Where have I traded authenticity for approval? What would my life look like if I stopped apologizing for existing? Don't rush the answers. Sit with them. Let them break you open if they must. Because healing isn't about fixing a flaw. It's about reclaiming your wholeness. And that wholeness, it was never gone. Just hidden. Behind trauma. Behind silence. Behind stories that said you weren't enough. But you were always enough. Even in your worst moments. Even when you doubted your worth. Even when no one else could see it. You were whole. This is the truth Jung saw so clearly. The darkness within you isn't the enemy. It's the portal. Through it, you meet the forgotten self. The creative one. The intuitive one. The one who stopped dreaming too young. So take her hand. Walk back into the parts of you that you were taught to fear. Because that's where your power lives. It's not in being polished. It's not in being pleasing. It's not in having it all figured out. It's in being real, messy, honest, alive. The kind of alive that makes you cry out of nowhere. That makes you laugh too loudly. That makes you walk away from anything that feels like a cage. You're not here to repeat the past. You're here to rewrite it from a place of love. So let them say you've changed. Let them say you're different. You are. And that's exactly the point. Because you didn't survive just to stay the same. You survived to rise, to heal, to remember, to live, fully, wildly, unapologetically. That's the path. Not back to who you were, but forward to who you were always meant to be. You were never broken. You were becoming. Maybe you didn't notice when it happened, because real healing doesn't come with a spotlight. It doesn't announce itself in loud, dramatic scenes. It arrives quietly, in the pause between breaths. In the moment you stop trying to prove your worth. In the sacred silence where your truth finally feels safe enough to speak. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart." Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And maybe that's what you're doing now, awakening. Not to a new version of yourself, but to the one that's been there all along, waiting behind the masks, beneath the coping, beneath the layers of who you were told to be. Healing isn't the finish line, it's the invitation. The moment you realize that your life, your real life, was always waiting for your permission to take up space, to be seen, to speak the truth without softening it for others, to feel joy that isn't borrowed, to cry without apology. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that fits neatly into their expectations. You owe yourself something greater, a life that feels like home. And that begins the moment you decide, I don't need to be fixed. I just need to be free. Free from the lies that say you're too much or not enough. Free from chasing approval that was never love. Free from the roles that taught you to abandon yourself because what you once called weakness was actually sensitivity. What you thought was failure was redirection. What you labeled as broken was the soul cracking open to let the truth in. Carl Jung didn't just offer psychology. He offered a map, a path through the unconscious, through the shadow, toward something whole, something sacred. He believed that within every one of us lives an inner self, not a version we manufacture, but a truth we remember, and that remembering is the greatest return. So if you're tired, rest. If you're scared, be gentle. If you're unsure, trust the small voice rising inside you now, because it knows, it always has. You were never behind. You were always becoming. And as you leave this video, I invite you to do just one thing. Honor the you that kept going. The version that survived the nights no one saw. That carried the weight in silence, that whispered, maybe there's more. Even when the world said otherwise, because there is more. Not in a distant future, but right here, in this very breath. You're not healing to become someone else. You're healing to remember. You were always enough. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, I created a powerful resource to walk beside you in this journey, an ebook filled with Jung's most transformative insights, adapted into practical emotional guidance for your path today. You'll find the link in the pinned comment. Let it support you. And if this video touched your heart, consider subscribing, because we're just getting started. Every week, we bring the kind of wisdom that's not just heard, but felt. Because healing isn't a destination, it's a return, and you right now are already on your way.